Okay, everybody. Thanks. Thanks for coming. I wish I had a picture of everybody. When we first moved here, several people kept asking me, can we hear you talk about your business? And I couldn't handle it. It was just too sad. I hated selling my business. I missed all my employees. It was really, really awful. And then a few months ago, Betsy said she was running out of people to do Friday with Friends. And I said, it's now or never. So I started digging through all the old boxes and found enough pictures to put together a show for you. I don't really have to read anything because it's a story. And I got it together, and I'm hoping that today will be therapeutic for me. Thanks. So Jim and I, whoever saw his boat building presentation saw him building a boat before we moved to Virginia's Eastern Shore. And then we were living at Berkeley Plantation, one of the historic plantations between Richmond and Williamsburg. And some friends of ours had moved to the Eastern Shore of Virginia. And I said, where's that? In my college yearbook, there was a picture of Virginia, and the Eastern Shore was not on the map. There were trucks driving around in Virginia with the map of Virginia and no Eastern Shore. Nobody, it's like, why does, and I kept thinking, wonder why Virginia only has Virginia Beach. Why doesn't it have a whole bunch of beaches like North Carolina? It does, but you have to get to them by boat. So we went to see our friends who lived there. We flew over the Eastern Shore, saw all the beautiful, the creeks there look like rivers. The barrier islands, all the seashells, all the oysters, all the crabs. We saw all that, and I said, I think I could live there. And Jim wanted to go there to build boats with our friend. So we moved there 40 years ago Halloween. And we had a black lab named Raven. So we get there, and I'm like, I had been working for an archaeological museum, and I had published a book about tobacco farmers, and I was making some jewelry, and I didn't know what to do for a living. So I applied for a job with social services, and they called me back and said I was one of the 2 finalists for it. And I started thinking, I didn't move here for that. I moved here to survive creatively, and I'm going to do it one way or another. So I called them, and I said, I'm not coming to the interview. And then I was like, what am I going to do? Jim was making $5 an hour boat building. We had bought an old farmhouse with $400 a month payment. We had no money in the bank. I mean, nothing. And it's like, what am I going to do? So I started riding around the back roads. We moved from, where's that little red thing? We moved from over this way, James River. Yeah, Berkeley is on the James River. We on this side, on Route 5. We moved from there. Route 5 went along here to, then you had to go through the tunnel here. And then this is the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel. And this is the Eastern Shore of Virginia. Crisfield there is in Maryland. Tangier Island is part of Virginia. But right here is where Virginia ends. There's 2 counties. It's one of the poorest areas in the state. We're bounded on one side by the Chesapeake Bay and on the other side by the Atlantic Ocean. 50,000 people in 2 counties. This is the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel. Everything we owned in the world was on a tractor trailer going across that day. Right now they're doing construction to make double tunnels. There's 2 separate tunnels right now, and they're doing construction to make more. And when you get to the other side, it's farmland. This is, believe it or not, oh, wait, go back. This is a creek. The creeks are like rivers there. And then the creeks run out to the ocean or the bay. Lots of farmland and fishermen. Crabs, oysters, clams. So I rode around the back roads trying to think, what am I going to do? And I visited a guy who was making baskets in an old store. And I thought, maybe I can come up with some items to put in the baskets to sell to the corporations here. Well, there was one corporation that grew chickens. That was it. So I worked with a friend who was a potter named Jose Dovis, and you'll see him later. He made handmade pottery and with beautiful blue and white pottery. He's Italian. I loved his stuff. I asked him to come up with a logo because I finally decided on a name after reading a book by William Warner called Beautiful Swimmers. And it was about how the Chesapeake Bay was the largest producer of blue crabs in the world. And I thought, well, it could have been called Blue Crab Bay. So Jose drew this, and then I got a professional designer to do the Blue Crab Bay Co. and the waves, and this was my logo. This was my first business card. I was proprietor at my farmhouse address, and my first little PR, and my first ad, and I had something called a Bay Basket, and those were all fake labels. Nothing was real. I was just seeing what was going to work. So we were in this old farmhouse. I needed an office, and some friends were opening this historic store on Nancock Creek into a restaurant deli, and I asked them if I could rent the upstairs part over here on the right-hand side, and they said that they would rent it to me for $100 a month. So I moved in, and I got a used electric typewriter, and I had some samples, and I had some books, and I called a local insurance agent and asked if I could get business insurance. We didn't talk about how much it was going to be. And a week after I moved in, the upstairs burned up. I lost everything. I'm sitting on the sidewalk, and the insurance guy comes over, and I says, was I covered? Because I'd never signed any paperwork. He said, yeah, you get $2,000. I went, $2,000? Man, I got startup capital. That shows the damage from the water and the black, soot and stuff. The phone number that I had, the company still has to this day. I went back home to work out of my home, and 6 weeks after the fire, Hurricane Gloria came through in August of 1985. This is Onancock. That's Jim standing on the left, and this is where he was building boats, and it all flooded pretty bad. And we had major damage at our house. These trees fell. The big elm tree right here knocked out windows. This is our lab in the hole that the root system pulled up. We had trees down all over the yard, but it happened. I heard a noise at 6. We were up because the house was shaking at 6 o'clock, and we didn't know where the hurricane was because the local radio station was off the air. And all we knew was it was between Virginia Beach and Ocean City, Maryland. That's all we knew. And we knew that we were in between there somewhere. So I heard this huge noise, and I went running upstairs, and the tree limb was coming in the guest bedroom window, and water was pouring in. And this was 6 o'clock in the morning. I come running down the stairs, and my knees are like this. And I said, Jim, I need a Bloody Mary. You'll hear more about that later. So anyway, another $2,000 worth of startup capital. But we had to pay for the guy to cut up the tree because they didn't cover that. They paid for the damage to the roof and the windows and that kind of stuff. So this is that property. Jim worked in the old barn back there. That was Chutney. And this was our first publicity in our local rural living. And here's the first location out of the house. A year after I started the business, I rented this little building, and Jim is up the top of the ladder hanging the sign. He can't do that anymore. And this is the lady on the left packed herbs for me. The lady on the left was my assistant. Me, the skinny one in the middle is me. The older lady in purple she loaned me $1,000 to start the business. And she made jams for me, and that's her daughter-in-law and her granddaughter. And this is in downtown Onancock, which has a population 1,000. And that's me with my first brochure. And first big article was in the Virginian Pilot, and this was in a gift shop in that building. This is in the back room. I had people started coming in off the street looking for jobs, and one of my goals was to create jobs. So these gals, the gal on the left had been a hairdresser, and she ended up being in charge of all the production eventually. This was our first shop. 2 realtors that were buying corporate gifts for their customers. And then In 1986, Self Magazine had a contest called Fresh Start, and it was for people who were starting something new in their lives. And I applied for it, and in my application, I said I needed capital, consultants, and contact with civilization. And surprisingly enough, I won. And I won $7,500, a trip to New York, trip to D.C., lots of national media. I was on Good Morning America or one of those shows. I still have this hanging at my home. And then this was when the photographer and the people from the magazine came to take pictures. And this was the magazine that it was in, and that's the article. And then there's an article that was in a local newspaper. Jim and I went out and bought a Boston Whaler. Had to have something to go get those seashells that we needed. This is the next building that we moved to. It was a big old 2-story brick building that a friend of mine bought, and he rented it to us. And that's my mother in red. She came to see us. And that's my mother in our gift shop there. All these specialty foods and gifts, it was specialty foods and gifts from the Chesapeake Bay is what we were selling. And we were mostly just retailing to consumers at that point. We had co-packers. Well, I had women in their homes, school teachers and people like that, blending herbs. The Department of Agriculture allowed it at that time. And we had co-packers. Like there was a co-packer on the Eastern Shore that did canned soups and clams. And I used to, the guy who canned the clams would come to my farmhouse with 2 cases of unlabeled clams, and we would put our label on them, okay? And then a local lady, a lady from Poland made the jams out of raspberries that she grew in her backyard. The honey came from an orchard there. And this is some of Jose's original stoneware with the crab and stuff.
Are you buying that from people and then reselling it?
Yeah. So this is, we didn't have a forklift or anything, and the gals are unloading the truck, and I think this was a mustard that we were private labeling. And then this is in that original building, and the lady who loaned me the $1,000 who made jam, her son worked for me for a few months before he went to college. And we had a seafood marinade, and we put fishnet over the top of it to make it look different on the shelf. We got a lot of TV coverage by this guy for a news station in Norfolk. And on the right is Lucille, and she was a special needs employee. We hired a lot of special needs employees, and we had, instead of using styrofoam bubbles, we used crumpled newspaper, and the Community Services Board had a group of people that would crumple the newspaper for, they were always delivering crumpled newspaper to us. This was in a magazine in Russia. I couldn't read it, so I found a woman who taught Russian in Norfolk at the university there, and I got a letter in the mail from a farmer in the upper eastern part of Russia proposing to me. He said his children had read this article and that they thought I would make a good wife. His wife had died, and he raised goats, and he thought that I would be a perfect wife, and could I please come to Russia and be his wife? And I hated to break his heart, but I had to get the lady who spoke Russian to write him a "I'm sorry I can't because I'm already married" letter. Up in the right, there's a church making jams on the upper left, and here is the two of the ladies packing herbs in the kitchen, and that's the shop.
What does it say?
I have no idea. Well, I think Cat Lamea is my Pam. I don't know what it says. Oh.
It says Pam Barefoot that gave us an idea about how Pam Barefoot opened her business.
How cool is that? Great. I'm glad somebody can read Russian. So then we were in the old farmhouse, and the phone rang, and I answered it, and this woman said, "Hello, we've been hearing about your business, and we're from Bon Appetit, and we would like to come to your house and film you, photograph you cooking in your kitchen." And I went, "I'm sorry, you got the wrong number." I'm like, there's no way they're coming to this old crotchety kitchen, and I can't cook in my kitchen anyway. But I said, let me call you back. So I thought about it, and I thought there's got to be some way I can get some publicity out of this. Okay. So I said, how about we go out to the islands by boat and have a picnic on the Barrier Islands? And they loved it. And it was an all-day ordeal getting everything out there and setting it all up, and everything went by boat. And this was back in June 1989 in Bon Appetit. We went back to a restaurant by boat, and one of the boats full of people had gotten lost. And we had to call the Coast Guard to come find them. It was a mess. So this is at one of the we started doing trade shows. Washington, D.C. Gift Show was one of the first shows we did, and Atlanta Gift Show. And I did all my own photography. And then 5 years after I started the business, we won a gold trophy, the Outstanding Food Gift Pack at the Fancy Food Show in New York City. And the Fancy Food Pack was just all this stuff of ours wrapped in old weathered Menhaden fishnet. Who knows who this is? I think this was in 1991 that she was taller than me. And she presented us with Award of Excellence for a regional product. And then when we won that gold trophy, she was with it on one of those Today shows or something, and she said that it was this woman from Maryland had won this award. And I'm like, Maryland? Nobody can get it straight. This was, the second building. We had a whole bunch, everything was hand done, and there were no computers then, no fax machines. Everything was hand done, and our landlord is in this picture. He had to be in it. Clam dip was my very first license tag after I started the business, and if you see it, it's on our golf cart. And now you know the rest of the story. Then we moved to our third building, which was an old furniture building. It was only one floor. We still didn't have a forklift. We did have a guy, Frank. Lucille is still with us. We had to borrow a forklift from the local, what'd you call that? Onancock Building Supply. They were right down the street, so they would bring a forklift over so that we could unload trucks. This was celebrating our 10th year, it says on the sign. These are seashells from the Barrier Islands, and this is how I ruptured my first disc. We used to go out in the Boston Whaler to pick up seashells to put in gift baskets. And we hired local people to go pick them up for us and bring them to our facility. In my office in the third building. Okay, so one day I get this phone call from, has anybody in here ever heard of Fearnell's Brunswick Stew? Mrs. Fearnell's Brunswick Stew. It's been around for 70 years, and it's in all the supermarkets. It's a canned Brunswick stew. It's very famous. So George Fearnell, whose grandmother had started the business, called me one day, and he said, Pam, every time I see your products, it makes me want to beat my wife. And I'm like, George, what do you mean? He said, your products that are in that movie. I said, what movie? He said, that new Julia Roberts movie. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. So I said, Jim, we got to go up to Salisbury, Maryland, which was an hour and a half away, to the closest movie theater and see this movie and see what he's talking about. So we get up there, and when she opens, if you've ever seen the movie, when she opens up the kitchen cabinet, there we are, right. That's why George wanted to beat his wife. I found out that the set designer had bought our products from a shop in Nag's Head or somewhere, because it was filmed in North Carolina. So we had hot dogs to celebrate being and sleeping with the enemy. So George Allen, he was the governor of Virginia back in, what year? Mid-90s. He came by to visit us. He helped me with something. He helped me get a law changed. And Lucille is on the right, and it was her birthday, and she liked smiley faces, and she had a goldfish in her office, and she labeled clams. And I said, Lucille, pretty soon we're going to hit $1 million in sales for the first time. What do you want to do? She said, go bowling. So I gave all my employees a little heavy desk weight, that said I helped make the first million, and that was in 1996. And we went bowling with our lawyer and Frank. The lawyer's on the upper right-hand side, and there's Lucille. Some of you have heard of a Southern season in Chapel Hill. Yeah. This is my cousin, first cousin Michael. He's 5 months older than me. When I first had the idea to do the business, he and I were at an aunt's wedding in Virginia Beach, and I told him about the idea and the fishnet and stuff. He said he thought it was a great idea. And a Southern season at that point had been in business 10 years. And I thought, well, if he says it's a great idea, it's got to be a great idea because he's so successful. So he's the one who helped me, get going on it. And this was a North Carolina magazine. They did a feature on the two of us. There's tobacco leaves under us because we both grew up on a farm right down the street from each other. And this is me several years later doing a demo at a Southern season in Chapel Hill. So we went a long way. This was in Coastal Living, the second issue of Coastal Living. So since it was so new, nobody saw it. Missed opportunity. But there's Clam Dip. This was in some airline, Midway Airlines, an article that they did. That's Bud on top of my head. You'll hear more about him. He was there 15 years. He was in Cooking Light magazine. And I wrote a book about him, and it's in the library here, if you want to read more about Bud. He sang the Andy Griffith theme song, and he was on our organizational chart. He was the vice president of noise and commotion. Whenever I went to a trade show, he got really upset, and he would eat my picture. And he would bite me, and all the girls took care of him. So I decided I wanted to do a Bloody Mary mixer. I figured, after, almost losing our house in that hurricane, I wanted to do a Bloody Mary mixer. So I started mixing together tomato paste and clam juice and Chesapeake Bay seasoning in the old farmhouse on the kitchen stove. And Jim's shaking his head. You don't need to be doing a Bloody Mary mixer. But I did it. I came out with it. And I got the law changed. Virginia ABC stores didn't carry any non-alcoholic mixers. And there was a Bloody Mary mixer in there that didn't have alcohol in the ingredients, but stamped in black on the label said contains 1% alcohol. I'm like, I know they're lying. There's no alcohol in this. This is like, so I wrote the head of the ABC a letter, and the response was unsatisfactory to me. They stood by their code. I said, when I first got the letter back, I thought, I'll never get anywhere with this. But with the help of our state delegate, we got the law changed. My idea was that they just carried Virginia mixers, but they brought in mixers from all over the United States, and I wish I'd gotten a commission. So then Stingray won a big gold trophy for outstanding beverage at the Fancy Food Show in New York. It literally saved the life of my company, that mixer. We got an order for $200,000 worth of it from Crate and Barrel. The network came down and they filmed the factory that was making it for us, and they filmed the ladies putting fishnet, and we used to put a fishnet and a seashell on it. So then we were on Food Network. They showed that story over and over and over again. We got a lot of orders from that. Perfect Storm. Who's seen that movie? We got a call from, I can't remember, Warner Brothers or somebody wanting a case of Stingray. And I didn't know what it was for. So my staff and I are in New York at the Fancy Food Show, and somebody said, y'all got to go see The Perfect Storm. So we all went, and we were all screaming when George Clooney walked by our bottle of mixer. Oh, my God, were we excited. Jim and I had to watch the movie recently so I could take this picture. Woo! Oh, man. In 1999, my bank nominated me for the SBA's Small Business Person of the Year for the state of Virginia, and I won. And you can't tell from this picture, but I had a cast on my left hand and a cast on my right foot. Because the day before, we were at Westover Plantation visiting some friends, and I ran into a cobweb, and I lost my balance on some gravel and had some breaks. So I had to get carried up to the stage in a wheelchair. But that's the governor of Virginia back then. His name was Jim Gilmore, and this was 1999, and that was the head SBA guy. I took that, what do you call that thing on? The sundial thing. I removed it from the stand, and I have that in my backyard where we live now. So you might see it at our back door sometime. So then in 2003, I got a call, and I was going to be presented with an award for Outstanding Woman Entrepreneur in Washington, D.C. And they said President Bush was going to be presenting it to 10 women. So one of my employees and I got all excited, and we're going up to the hotel, and here comes another hurricane. Bush didn't make it. We're sitting around this table, and this guy comes around, hands each of us our little award, and the hotel lost power, and we left D.C. All the stoplights were out. We came across the bridge to Maryland, and sailboats were laying on their sides, and so that's my memory of this award. And the newspaper had said, our local newspaper had said that President Bush was going to give me the award. That didn't happen. Okay. So this was in Southern Living, 2005, and by this time, Jim and I had built a house, and we're living on the water, and we had a dock. And then this was celebrating 25 years in a local newspaper. And then a woman named Claire Murray, who's a designer, I don't know if she's still around or not. She had a lot of stores, Claire Murray shops nationwide, mostly New England, and she had a magazine called La Vie Claire, which was real upscale, and she sent people down to, this was in our great room, she sent people down to photograph our products made for her magazine. This is Kelly, who worked for me with Jim in our kitchen, steaming crabs for the photos. We had a his and hers kitchen. We had 2 sinks. And then this is one of the magazines that it was in, and there's Stingray. And I am making Jim's Bloody Mary chili. Remember the guy who said, you shouldn't be making Bloody Mary? That's what it's called, and it was really good. So this is, then Claire called and said she's coming out with this big coffee table book. I think, Polly, you got a copy of this, right, this book? It features 12 women and their stories and their relationship with the water. So this was in there. And our company won a lot of awards. This isn't even all of them. At one point, one of the employees were always entering contests. And one day they came in and they went, guess what? We won a so-and-so. And I'm like, no. We don't need to win. We've won enough. We don't need to win any more trophies. And I know we had outstanding beverage and outstanding snack mix and outstanding gift pack. I can't remember what all they were for. This was two of the first items I started out with were clam. I used to love clam dip. So I mixed some herbs together and came out with a recipe to make clam dip. So now you're going to see some of the products. This is what they look like now. Some of them, not all of them. We started adding color. I love this product to steam crabs and spices, salt-free. I was flying to San Diego I was on the board of directors of the Fancy Food Show for about 12 years in New York, and we were flying to California for a board meeting, and the guy sitting beside me on the airplane was with a peanut company in Virginia, and he said, why don't we do something with your seasonings and my nuts? And I went, and what would we call them? He said, crab nuts. I went, no, I don't think so. So crab house nuts was our first nut. And then we started adding more flavors. Stingray was our number one seller for years until we came out with sea salt nuts. And then so sea salt nuts became the number one seller. Bud liked to taste everything. He loved he loved barnacles. Jim and I were in Nevis, West Indies when we came up with the name for this product, barnacles. Oh, it's a snack mix with little crackers and peanuts and pretzels, and it's just a snack and Chesapeake Bay seasoning. So it's a spicy little snack mix. These were salt and pepper peanuts. This is one I came out with a few years before I sold the business, Oysters Rockefeller Mix. This was one of our best-selling soups, and people at the trade shows would always go, "Why do you call it she crab soup?" And I said, "Because most of my employees are women." These are some of the stores that we sold to over the years. I have no idea. I have no idea about. You don't even have any of your products at all? No. I have some 9-year-old seasonings that we still use. That's about it. Harris Teeter was a big customer. They would do about $200,000 a year when we sold to them. Home Goods was a really big customer. Bass Pro used to be a big customer. Trader Joe's ordered 8 train car loads of Bloody Mary mixers shipped from our packer all the way to California.
I found some on Amazon.
I wouldn't buy it from Amazon. I don't think our business never sold directly to Amazon, and it was like other people selling it, and you never knew how old it would be. So this is on the Queen Mary ship in Long Beach, California. Somebody went there, a friend of mine went there and sent me the picture. And this was in Hilton Head Island. And this was in New Orleans. And this was in Malibu Seafood in California. Snug Harbor was a different Bloody Mary mixer I came out with that had no clam juice for people who had aversions to clam juice. This is Jose. I had to take this picture out of one of our old publications because I didn't have a good one, so it's poor quality. But he designed my logo crab, and he was an old friend from before we moved to the Eastern Shore. And we used to sell his original stoneware, and he wanted to get it made in Thailand. So he asked us if we would handle that. So I started being up in the middle of the night, emailing back and forth with folks in Thailand, and I designed the salt shakers and the little thing and an oyster dish. And we came out with a lot of new items that he hadn't had before. We started incorporating them with our products. So we would do a gift pack that had the Chesapeake Bay seasoning with the shaker. This was an oyster dish. This is in our warehouse. We had these little cardboard boats made in China, and we filled them with different items. And we put, chowder in the chowder bowls. A long time ago, we sold through mail order catalogs to consumers, and then we had a website for consumers. So these are some of the first catalogs. You can see Jim back there in that picture somewhere. We tried to encourage, I was very active in tourism on the Eastern Shore. I was on all the committees I could get on, and we were always trying to build up tourism there. I noticed this today. I always said our motto is never a dull day at Blue Crab Bay. Selling nationwide and internationally has helped us maintain a business, but being good community citizens has made our company a family. And I think what I miss the most is my family there, but I got a family here now. So then I had this idea. I hated catalogs. People hated catalogs. I'm going to come out with every year a recipe calendar. That way people hang it up and they don't ever forget us. Every year they have a calendar. So this is a bunch of calendars. We had some real, and one year I featured local B&B recipes using our products. One year I featured local restaurants using our products. Bloody Mary shooter, fresh oyster. Oh, another lost thing. Right after Stingray came out, and this is before internet, before a website, the New York Times had a blind taste test of 8 Bloody Mary mixers. Stingray was #1. Do you know we got nothing from it because they didn't say what the name of the company was or where we were located. We didn't have a website. We were the #1 in a blind taste testing of 8 mixers in the New York Times and nothing. Another lost opportunity. So then we kept outgrowing where we were, and we had something called the Virginia Enterprise Zone. And if you could qualify for it, they would give you 25 or 30% of the cost of building the building back to you. So we built this building, and at first it was 12,000 square feet, and by the time I left, it was 24,000 square feet on 5 acres. And we changed our corporate name to Bay Beyond because of the stoneware. We wanted to be bigger, to incorporate more things instead of just being Blue Crab Bay. And we had a gift shop, and we had a loading dock on the left and a loading dock on the far right. That's my mother. She always came to see me. She brought all the plants for the building. This is our gift shop. All the seasonings, snacks. We had a very strong Relay for Life team. We won a lot of awards. The staff was very proud of being involved in that.
What is Relay for Life?
It's a fundraiser for the American Cancer Society. Many years, my team came out as the top team on the Eastern Shore of Virginia. And I'm over there, and I don't remember how I got that break, but this is the same shirt, you know. I think this was 1999, and we were at this Italian guy's restaurant, and we had a Relay for Life event there. I think we were waitressing to raise money. 10 years ago this summer, there was a really bad tornado on the Eastern Shore of Virginia, and it wiped out Cherry Stone Campground. It came right across the Chesapeake Bay and hit the campground. People were killed. I was astounded. I know the owner of this campground, and I didn't even call him. I called PNC Bank and set up a fund for the family. The mother, the father were killed. The 2 daughters and the son were alive, but the son was later pulled from life support that week. We raised $30,000, $30,000 or $35,000 for this family, for these 2 girls here, and that's their parents. They were Filipino from New Jersey, and that was their campsite. And my staff, we closed up one day, and everybody on my staff went over there to help clean up. And you see Jim, he could walk back then, he could rake, he was cleaning. This was our booth at the Fancy Food Show in New York City. It was a hard job, I tell you. I'm glad I don't have to unpack those pallets anymore. In one year, the Fancy Food Show was in Washington, D.C. It usually is in New York, but one year they moved it to Washington, D.C., and we rented a limo and took all the staff up to see the show so they could walk the show. We were always in a section, the Virginia section. There were about 3 dozen companies from Virginia, especially food companies, and I had helped organize that in 87 or 88. Help build that up. So I was on the board of directors of this fancy food show, which is a really big organization for, I don't know, 11 or 12 years. And I had to fly up to New York about 6 times a year for board meetings on Wall Street at their offices. And one year, our plane sat on the tarmac for an hour in New York. I don't know why. And I was in a 2-seater, and there was an older gentleman sitting beside me. And I reached, and we weren't talking, and thank God I was reading Inc. magazine, because usually I would read People magazine. And I reached in my pocket, and I pulled out a cookie that I had saved from the hotel luncheon, and he reached in his pocket and took out a cookie. And so then we started talking. And we talked and talked, and he said he was on his way to Virginia Beach to sail in his boat on the Chesapeake Bay for the weekend. And I said, oh, how big is your boat? He said, 70 feet. I went, ooh, it's a big one. He said, yeah, I have a crew of about 8 that help me on there. He handed me his card, and I was so glad that I wasn't reading People magazine. I still have his card, Maurice Templesman. He was Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis's consort for 12 years. I had seen pictures of him walking her in Central Park when she was dying. And that weekend was the 2nd anniversary of her death when he gave me his card. And when he handed me his card, I looked at it and I went, oh, I know who you are. And I went, what are you doing? And why aren't you in first class? I elbowed him. I said, what are you doing back here? It's like, he's a billionaire. He could be flying in his own plane. And that weekend is when he was on the plane with JFK Jr. and his girlfriend. I don't think they were married yet. And then 2 years later, JFK Jr. was killed in a plane crash. Well, actually, let me tell you the more of this. He left with me from the plane, and when I got back to Virginia, his private chef called me and ordered our products for his kitchen. And he started being a regular customer of Snug Harbor because he didn't want the clam juice. So 2 years after I met him, JFK Jr. was killed in a plane crash, and I felt terrible. I was so crushed. I was so upset. I had this overwhelming urge to send somebody a sympathy card, so I sent Mr. Templesman a sympathy card. He sent me a thank you card for my sympathy card. This is the kind of man he is. I looked him up. He's still alive. I mean, it's like, how many people send thank you cards for sympathy cards? So I kept his card because it meant a lot to me. So this was at our last big building, and we had a lot of meetings and employee get-togethers and parties, and Jim was the cook. Jim brought me my lunch every day into my office. The girls were really jealous that I had a husband. Well, he was working for a bronze foundry, and we needed a guy to put up pallet racks and help us out with things. So I got him to leave his job and come work for us, and he worked for us for about 10 years. And then he had rotator cuff surgery, and he couldn't change light bulbs anymore, so I had to fire him. This is like when an order of Bloody Mary mixer came in, we would have like 2,000 cases come in at a time. Fishnet and cord going around. And everybody had to cut the fishnet, and we had people dyeing the cord blue. It was very labor intensive. This is Reggie. He was in the shipping department for a while. These are all orders that are ready to go out. All those boxes you see are packed up and going somewhere. This is one of my success stories. Dawn started working for me when she was 16 and had a 2-year-old daughter and was still in high school.
What?
Yep. She would leave work when we were in that little tiny building in downtown Hancock and go pay her light bill or her phone bill. She would leave work to pay her bill. I said, Dawn, why are you leaving to go pay your bill? Why don't you just mail them a check? I don't have a checking account. So I took her to the bank and we opened her a checking account. By the time I sold the business, she was vice president of finance, handling all the money, all the banks, everything, all the accounting. And now she works for the state of Virginia's Lotto department. She's in charge of Lotto, all the finance. She's making like $90,000 a year. And they weren't going to hire anybody unless they had a college degree, and she had no college at all. Her degree was Blue Crab Bay University. So I'm very, very proud of her. In the rear, unfortunately, he's getting some bad publicity, but you see the pictures of Garth Brooks. She didn't know how to drive across the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel. She was too scared, and she loved Garth Brooks, and she wanted to go see him so bad that I took her to see Garth Brooks. This was in 2011. Somebody contacted us, and we were a nominee for this Taylor Murphy Resilience Award. And they had different categories like manufacturing, blah, blah, blah. I can't remember everything. But Jim and I had to go to UVA for this award ceremony, and they announced all the different awards. And the very last award they got to was the head one. I can't remember what it was called, but it was the Head Resilience Award for, it was from the Darden School of Business at UVA. And I won it. I got to go up and get this trophy, and I just couldn't believe it. We got a lot of publicity out of it, and it was pretty amazing. As a result of that, I got a free week of education in marketing at the Darden School of Business, and I stayed there, and that was really, really interesting. And I brought this one back with me after I sold the business. I still have this, the Chairman's Award. It was the top one. This is my TV in my bedroom on the Eastern Shore. I woke up one morning and turned on the Today Show, and there we were. I'm like, what are we doing there? And the girls told me that somebody in New York had called and ordered several cases of nuts. We had Matt Lauer while he was still a thing. My staff, if they dressed up for Halloween, I would take them out for lunch. Can you find Jim? Jeez. I don't think he was in this picture. This was another year. This was 2015. I was very active with the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, the executive director, and they were very strong supporters of ours and us of them. And so they invited us for a tour beneath the scenes, beneath the tunnels, the behind-the-scenes tour. And we did that. And at the Fancy Food Show in New York, we were importing all this stoneware from Thailand, and it was coming into the Port of Virginia. And two guys who were in charge of the Port of Virginia came by the booth and said, we would like to have you guys for lunch one day at the Port of Virginia. So we go there, and we're in this room, and all the curtains are dark, and they show us a movie about the Port of Virginia. And then they open up the curtains, and it's like, oh, my God. All these ships are there, and all these containers and on the water. And it's like, it's this huge scene. It was amazing. So that was at the Port of Virginia. So the last year I owned my business, I was sort of toying around with trying to find a buyer. And just in the nick of time, I got nominated for the Specialty Food Association Hall of Fame. And that was a big ceremony, and I got to go up on stage in front of a lot of people. My cousin also won it the same year. And we got this thing about this big, and it weighs about 50 pounds. It's so heavy I can hardly lift it, that Hall of Fame thing there. So then I sold the business, and it was doing due diligence was the last year of my life, and I also broke my wrist that year. My first wrist break. And it was really, really, really hard to walk away, but I did it. I thought this would take longer than an hour. What did I miss? I think I got it all. Oh, I know. I got one more thing I want to tell you. Some of our interesting customers. You know who Frank Sinatra is? I was at the Fancy Food Show, and his private bartender came up and said, "Frank has your Bloody Mary mixer in his liquor cabinet." I'm like, wow. Sir Richard Branson, one of the top billionaires in the world, the head of his Necker Island in the Caribbean that rents out for like $90,000 a week, ordered nuts from us all the time. I think that's about all I can think of. You know, if I still owned the company, there would be clam dip out, all the nuts, Bloody Mary, everything would be out for you to taste, plus a discount coupon and a calendar, but I don't own it anymore. I sold it, it closed December 28th, 2016. And that was the end of that. No, the business is still in business, but I think out of like 20 employees, there's only one left. And I still am very close with all of my employees. And a lot of the products have been discontinued. They really downsized. I think COVID hurt them bad. So I'm really glad I was able to get out before that happened.
Yeah, sure. Well done, Ms. Barefoot.
Any other questions? Yeah, Blue Crab Bay is the brand of the food items, and the crab pottery would be made by us. They've added a lot of crab stoneware to the line.
Is Harris Teeter still selling?
Do you still know how to make that Bloody Mary mixture?
I do, but Jim's favorite Bloody Mary mixer now is Zing Zang. Zing Zang. It's on the stores. You can buy it at Harris Teeter. You know, Walmart has the lowest price. It's similar, but it doesn't have clam juice in it, and it doesn't have seafood seasoning. We had seafood seasoning, and we had dehydrated celery and clam juice. And you can make Bloody Mary chili with Stingray. Well, I started it in 1985, and I sold it in the end of 2016. A long time. Well, we moved to the Eastern Shore 40 years ago this month, and I started it a year after we moved there. So, and I sold it in 2016. So I don't know. I can't keep up with it all.
40 years. 41. And so, Pam, when you went there to the little Eastern Shore place and talked to the crab people and all that, was it your intention to make a big business? Because I pictured you just going out and catching crabs and selling crabs.
My goal was to survive creatively, and I had no idea. It's like when I started making clam dip on my kitchen table, the seasoning and things like and crab dip seasoning, I thought I was just going to sell. I went through the donors to Chesapeake Bay Foundation and went through the phone directory and got their mailing address and added them to my mailing list for my first catalog. Okay, and I mailed my little brochure out to every consumer I could find, and I thought it was just going to be a direct-to-consumer business and that I would be doing corporate gift baskets. But then the first year, I started getting phone calls from businesses wanting to know what was the wholesale price. And I'm like, wholesale price? I gave it away the first year. I had no idea what I was doing.
Wow, something clicked.
Well, you got to reach out for help. And I reached out to Small Business Development Center in Virginia Beach, sent a consultant over, and I had the retired, what do you call it, SCORE, Service Corps, retired executives. I had a lot of those guys working with me, helping me. A woman who's a really good friend of mine, in 1990, we got matched up through the SBA through a women's mentorship program, and I ended up introducing her to her husband, you know, so it's like, but it's like last week with the hurricane coming, I'm thinking, here's the hurricane, and my business, I got my startup capital through a hurricane. So like, so my speech last week got canceled because of the, come hell or high water.
And is that man who gave you his card on the airplane, you said he's still alive?
A few weeks ago, I looked him up and he was still alive and he had a girlfriend. Huh?
Oh, his girlfriend?
He has a girlfriend now. Oh yeah. Got his card. It was as my employees say, we had a good run. We did a lot of good for our community, and we had a good run. Jim, you got anything you want to add? He says, we don't need a Bloody Mary mixer. Any other questions? All right, thank you all for coming. I really